Welcome to Exoneration Nation podcast. I'm the host, Christopher Scott, and today I have a very special guest. This special guest is Judge Robert Burns. So, why is financial compensation for exonerees that serve similar sentences before the exoneration vastly different?
What? What you mean, like in different states? It's
Yeah,
different?
yeah.
I don't know. When Texas did what they did, I was actually kind of surprised because I thought that seems fair.
Right. Right,
I was
right.
surprised Texas was relatively generous in the sense that
I was too.
Yeah, because southern states tend to be less.
Yeah. A little more harsher.
A little harsher.
Yeah, more harsher.
So I'm glad Texas has it the way it is. I know I've heard of lawyers complaining about, sometimes maybe a DA's office will fight harder on a finding of actual innocence, and the fight maybe really is kind of a mine. It shouldn't be that way.
Right.
The DA's office should
Right. For sure.
Different DA's office.
Right.
They should. That happens.
Yeah, it does.
Other states, they really should step up and do the right thing, because I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's
cool.
terrible.
Right.
It's an awful thing when our system screws up.
Right.
It takes away somebody's liberty.
Yeah. They should be compensated for it.
They should be compensated.
Exactly.
For that. Just no ifs, ands, or buts, and be relatively generous about it.
Right. We got to get our life back. So we got to get everything we lost in going to prison for a crime we commit. We got to get it back.
That's right.
And then you never know what we could have accomplished while being out before we was wrongfully convicted. I was surprised about Texas because at first it was 25,000, then it went to 50,000, then it went to 80,000, and they were saying like the only reason, if y'all take this compensation money and choose not to sue us, we would give y'all an annuity as well. So I think all of that combined with that led to a lot of men accepting that compensation without filing a civil lawsuit against the county. So do you think that, the exonerees did the right thing about not filing for a civil suit or just taking the compensation?
Probably they did the right thing. I guess there's no way to know for sure.
Right.
But I would say that probably, yes, they probably are doing the right thing because, part of, I think part of, something you're to be commended for.
Right.
But I think part of the whole getting out of prison and moving on with your life is moving on with your life.
Right.
And if you're embroiled in a lawsuit that might last 3, 4
years, 10 years.
10 years.
Right.
It's like you're not moving on. You're still
stuck.
You're still suffering.
Right.
Being a party to a lawsuit sucks. What? Criminal, certainly, but civil too. It sucks. It sucks because your case is dragging on, and you're having to talk to your lawyer all the time, and what's happening.
Right.
You'd be if you, let's say you had fought your lawsuit.
Right.
Let's say it took 5 years.
Right.
Who knows how awful your life might have been for those 5 years because you're having a hard time getting a job.
Right.
Blah blah blah. So it's. I think it's generally better. To take the money.
Because our only thing that we ever look for is closure.
Yeah.
We want that closure. We want everything to leave the past in the past and move forward to the present.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about the death penalty case? Should the state of Texas abolish it, or because it's at one point in time we wasn't even having death penalty, getting people executed.
Right.
Now it's like they are doing it kind of rapidly again or whatever. Do you think it should be abolished altogether, or do you feel like we should slow it down until we have no other choice but to execute this person?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I was looking at the newspaper today, the local paper, and I had an article about Cruz. I don't know if you saw the article today about Cruz, where he was talking about that Chimera. I don't know how you say it, but the guys
To
charged with
Rice.
suffocating all those.
Yeah, the
Folks
folks
in
in the old folks home. Yeah, in the
and
retirement
anyway,
homes.
he Crusoe's kind of talking about, I'm looking at these factors, and I appreciate his thoughtfulness on all
Right.
of that. I represented, when I was a defense lawyer, I represented one capital murder death penalty murder defendant, and that guy got the death penalty, and he's not alive anymore. And I really think that he shouldn't have gotten the death penalty.
Is it because he didn't commit the crime, or the crime didn't warrant death penalty?
He did commit the crime. There's no question that he committed the crime.
Right.
I just thought that there were some mitigating circumstances to where he should have gotten life in prison. And the jury didn't see it our way.
Right.
I think in the South, I guess, mainly, I think the death penalty gets applied or gets sought too often. That's one thing I think that Crusoe's doing right.
Right.
Is seeking it less.
Right.
I presided over post-conviction hearings in a case out of that my predecessor presided over the trial, but we had lengthy post-conviction hearings in this case. The defendant's name was John Battaglia, and he had murdered his two daughters, shot them with a pistol while he was on the phone with his ex-wife.
Wow.
And he did it. He did it because he hated his ex-wife that much. So he called her up on the phone. It was right before Christmas, and he said, "Merry Christmas." And he shot those two girls on the phone while
the mom was listening.
So, I've had, after that case got resolved and he got sent back to death row, and then later I had people walk up to me, and say, "You know what? I'm against the death penalty, but I think that guy deserved it." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, then I guess you're not against it.
Right.
You just think it gets used too much.
Right.
I do too.
Right.
It has in the past.
Right.
That one young man that is now dead, I really, Crusoe would not have sought the death penalty.
Right.
On that kid.
Right.
Because there really were mitigating. So I think, I don't know that I'm anti-death penalty.
Right.
But I just think it needs to be, really and truly for the very worst of the
exactly.
very worst.
Right. Exactly. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I don't think it should be completely gone. But
right.
Has it been overused? Yeah.
Yeah.
No question about it.
Because why I asked that question, because I don't know if you're familiar with Max so far. He was in the documentary, and he did a triple murder at the bowling alley in Houston. And come to find out that, it was all kind of circumstances that led people to believe that he didn't do it because he couldn't have did it. He couldn't have been at two places at one time. He on death row for 40 years. And prior to him dying of liver cancer, it was stated that, we had looked into his case. We had got the information that we needed. And his case was on appeal. And they had came back with a ruling to give him a new trial, and he died. What would be your take on it?
Those are the times where I just, as a judge, what can you do other than just feel like
bad for the person?
Feel bad for the person, for his family, and if he had kids, and
right.
That's the part that kind of tore me up about presiding over your exoneration. Was it's like, I wasn't a part of this. I wasn't in the room when it happened. I wasn't a judge.
Right.
And here I am. I felt like I needed to try real hard to give a sincere apology on behalf of the state of Texas.
And you did.
I tried real hard.
You did. You did that. I really appreciate that.
I wrote,
you did.
I sat there. I'm not, even for being a lawyer, I'm really not all that good with words, but I worked on that, what I was going to say.
Right.
I just felt like, on behalf of the state of Texas, you deserved, in addition to compensation, a very sincere apology from. Right. At that time, I was the face of the state of Texas in that courtroom. Right. But that's the tough thing about being a part of the system is it's like, man, you just hate it when it goes wrong. Right. You really do.
Because you can't bring those people back to life again.
That's right. It's tough.
It's tough.
It's tough. And, as I went to a funeral today, one of our employees at the Court of Appeals died. So,
sorry to hear that.
Yeah. And so I went to a funeral today. But, as I get older, how are you? Are we the same age? Or are you a little bit younger?
I'm 51.
Oh, you're a little bit younger. Okay. But as you get older, you really kind of even have more of an appreciation for how much time you have left on
Right,
earth.
right, for sure. Yeah.
So I guess I get a little more
Sensitive.
sensitive about
Right.
that whole thing. When you're young, you kind of
Brass, don't really
Yeah,
care about you don't care. You don't really
you don't even appreciate
Yeah,
you don't
right.
appreciate it like
Right.
you do when you get closer
Right.
and you start knowing people that die, or parents
Right.
or family or whatever.
right.
So yeah, that's hard. It's a hard thing about being a judge or being a part of the system when you see a case like that.
Right.
It's tough. What can you do though?
So do you think it should be fair for an African American person to have an all white jury panel?
I think generally no, it's not. I mean, it really isn't. And I don't know how we're doing on time, but if I can tell you a
Yeah,
little
go
story.
ahead.
So that one case that I was a defense lawyer on, where the guy who's now deceased on the death penalty case, we were kind of rocking towards the way we were going during jury selection.
Mhm.
It was looking, it's individual on capital
Right,
on death penalty
right.
cases, so it takes a long time. And we were about 2/3 of the way through picking the jury, and it was because you see all the questionnaires.
Right.
It was looking like we were going to end up with all white jury. And I went over to see the client in jail, and I said, things aren't looking real good in terms of us getting some African Americans on the jury.
Right.
Now this was under a different DA. This was
Right.
Bill Hill.
Be a here. Right.
And I went and visited with him for a while, with the client about that for a while. And I said, there's a couple jurors coming up that I think we can get on the jury. But I told him, I said, this one in particular I think he's a really conservative guy. I don't think he's really going to be favorable
Right.
towards you.
Right.
But I think we can get him on the jury. And my client said, yeah, I really want to have at least one African American on my jury.
Right.
I kind of had to trick the prosecutor. He thought we were going to strike him, and so he didn't make a motion to strike, and I kind of tricked him, and then we got this African American on a jury,
Mm-hmm.
and the prosecutor got so mad he jumped up and left the court.
Oh wow.
Because he wanted to have an all white jury.
Jury
He
panel.
really
Right.
did.
Right.
I mean, you wouldn't think necessarily it would be this recent in time.
Right.
You would think that'd be back in the
Big-
60s
right,
and 70s.
right.
But it happened on the case that I was on. It's not a good thing to not have some African.
Jury members of your peers on the
Just
scene.
sort of a somewhat close
Right.
to the,
Right.
But I will say though that there are some African Americans that are really strong states-minded jurors.
Right.
Maybe old school prosecutors don't
Right,
realize that,
right.
but some African Americans are pretty doggone conservative
Right.
in law and order, and
Right.
they'll convict you.
Yeah, I know because in my trial, it was so funny where the judge said, like, it was like 3 different jury panels came in and all of them said they couldn't find me guilty. Simple fact, we had no physical evidence. But it was one African American guy stood up and said, I can find Mr. Scott guilty. 10 minutes later, I had an all white jury panel. And I'm thinking, like, did you really do that? Did you really get up and say that as being an African American man, he had to be very conservative?
Yeah.
And to say that, I was like, I couldn't believe that another African American guy would say that and wasn't even chose to be on the jury panel. And it was crazy. I was like, oh my God, seriously.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand it. I have one more final question for you. Do you remember show up lineups?
Oh yeah.
What do you think about them?
The system that they have now is infinitely better.
Yes.
Infinitely better.
Yeah.
Have you sat through some trials where you've heard that testimony presented? Since they changed it.
You mean the show up
The
lineup?
sequential photos,
Yeah.
one at a time.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
is infinitely better.
Right.
Show ups are not good.
Yeah, see, that what happened to me. And I think
Show ups
that
are bad.
Mike Ware had said they had stopped doing it right after my trial because that's exactly what happened to me. Sitting on the bench,
It's
the
terribly
cop,
suggestive.
it's like the cop picked me out. It wasn't even the the accuser, the cop saying, "This is the man that killed your husband." And she said, "Yeah, that's him." When the
Yeah.
question, it was a statement, but it came from the cop,
Yeah.
not even the person that said she had
It's
some
terribly
mean.
suggestive.
Yeah.
I grew up in far north Dallas and was kind of just, generic upper middle class white kid.
Right.
Grew up in far north Dallas. Well, when I was a prosecutor, a fairly new prosecutor, we'd just gotten recently married, and my wife and I, ex-wife now, but we went to the hill country and we're staying in some cabin in Fredericksburg, and a peeping Tom looked through the window. And I got to look at the person, and I would call the cops, and they came out about 20 minutes later. And the cop shows me a picture, and he goes, "Is this the guy?" And I said, "No, because his hair is different. This part,
Right.
And the cop goes to me as a prosecutor. He didn't know I was a prosecutor,
Right.
but I'm paying extra careful attention
Right.
because I'm having this police encounter.
Right.
And the cop says to me, he goes, "Are you sure that's not him? Because he lives over here, and we have a lot of trouble with this guy." And so, as a prosecutor, I was like, "Okay, now I know what they're talking about when they say that police don't sometimes do things the right way."
Right.
So that had a big influence on me as a young prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, cops really do cut corners, or
Right. Yeah.
or the wrong thing.
Right.
Not just cut a corner, but
Right.
flat out the wrong thing.
Right.
Now, most cops try to do the right
Thing. Right.
But as we all know, there are more than just one or two that don't do the right thing, unfortunately.
So, do you think voting helps a lot to get the right people in the right position to make the right decisions and choices?
Yeah, absolutely. People don't vote nearly enough in this country.
Right.
You know what? Only about 50% of Americans vote.
Right.
If it were mandatory, or somehow you could get
Right.
90% of people to vote, we would be better off in this country.
Do you think offenders should have a right to vote,
I do.
even if they're in prison?
That's an interesting point, and I have come around to thinking that yes, if you're a citizen,
You can serve time.
if
Right.
you're a citizen
Right.
and you're breathing,
Right.
you
Should be able to vote.
That's
Right.
what I think. And I used to kind of be kind of back and forth on that issue, but I was very strongly of the opinion that if you're not in prison, you should be able to vote, no matter
Right.
what kind of paper you're on.
Right.
If you're having to work,
Right. Paying taxes. Right.
then you
Should be able to
damn well
vote.
ought to be able to go vote.
Right.
And I've since come around to the notion that just everybody ought to be able to vote. As long as you're a citizen, you can vote.
Well, Judge Burns, I appreciate you for being here. Thanks for coming,
My
and it's
pleasure.
always a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Really a pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.